In this video, I'm going to give you my list of who I think are the best Baroque composers. But there's one catch. I'm going to go through them alphabetically, A to Z, and I can only give one composer for each letter. So this is really going to be my best of the best of Baroque music list, and hopefully you learn about some composers that you didn't know about before, but you should definitely check out. Okay, let's get started. This is the first of 3 videos I'm going to put out on this topic. This video will cover the letters A through H. So please subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell if you want to find out when the next 2 videos come out, or if you just want to learn more about early music in general. Oh, and I also have a Patreon account where you can support me and help me keep making these videos. So if you're interested, please check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. Okay, so let's dive into our Baroque composers. For the letter A, I've chosen Gregory Allegri. He was born in Rome in 1582 and died there in 1652. He was a chorister and choir director, eventually ending up as a singer and director of the papal choir under Popes Urban VIII and Innocent X. Allegri wrote quite a bit of vocal music, but his most famous piece is his Miserere, which you might recognize because of the repeating section that has a very high note in it. In addition to being a popular composition today, it was also popular throughout the classical and romantic periods at a time when most other Baroque music was not in fashion. For the letter B, I'm sure you can already guess who I'm going to pick. Of course, it's Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach was born in Eisenach in 1685 and died in Leipzig in 1750. He lived and worked in a lot of different places in Germany throughout his life, but the place that he lived the longest was in Leipzig. There are so many famous pieces by Bach, although that wasn't the case during Bach's lifetime. He was a relatively unknown composer then. But he was known more at that time as a keyboard virtuoso, and one of the relatively few works of his published during his lifetime was the Goldberg Variations, which starts out with a main theme called the aria, which is then followed by 30 variations, which altogether take around an hour or more to play, which was a massive keyboard piece for the time. For the letter C, the composer I've chosen is Archangelo Corelli, although François Couperin comes in a relatively close second. Corelli was born in Fusignano in 1653 and died in Rome in 1713. I picked Corelli because his Opus 5 violin sonatas, which were first printed in 1700, were a smash hit all over Europe when they were first published, and even for about 20 years before they were published, and they, along with his other collections of sonatas, really defined and codified the violin sonata and were incredibly influential to the music that came after them. The Opus 5 collection of sonatas even includes a variation set on one of the most popular patterns of the day, La Folia, which was a pattern popular in Europe for several hundred years. We've made it to the letter D, and my pick for this letter is Michel Ricard de Lalande, which is sometimes spelled as 2 words de Lalande. While not particularly famous today, de Lalande was an incredibly important composer in the late French Baroque, and was a composer and performing musician at the court of Louis XIV. He was born in Paris in 1657 and died at Versailles in 1726. He was arguably the most important composer of grand motets, which was a genre very popular in late Baroque France, and he wrote more than 70 of them, most of them including all the hallmarks of French Baroque music, such as notes inégales, overdotting, steady pacing that's related to how dance music unfolds, and specialized ornaments, such as the tremblement sans appuyer or the tierce collée. Okay, so letter E was actually kind of a difficult one, because there surprisingly aren't very many composers in the Baroque period whose names start with the letter E for some reason. So I've chosen John Eckos, who was an English composer of theater music, as well as a composer for the court. Eckos was probably born in London around 1668 and died in Hampton Wick in 1735. Most all of his extant music is vocal music, and sometimes combines elements of Italian Baroque, such as angular melodic lines, with a more English Baroque style. While it was somewhat hard to find a stellar Baroque composer for the letter E, there are several Baroque composers whose names start with the letter F. I've chosen geolama fresco Bali, who was born in Ferrara in 1583 and died in Rome in 1643. He was one of the most famous musicians of his day and often drew large audiences to performances he gave while organist at St. Peter's Basilica. He's best known for his keyboard toccatas, which were ahead of their time both in their treatment of dissonance and in their idiomatic writing. And his first book of toccatas, published in 1615, was one of the first collections of keyboard music to state that it was specifically for the harpsichord. Most keyboard collections before that had simply not specified an instrument. Okay, on to letter G. My G composer is Francesco Gemignani. He was born in Lucca in 1687, but died in Dublin in 1762, having first moved to London when he was in his 20s, and then eventually ending up in Ireland after spending some time in Paris. While he's somewhat lesser known today, Gemignani was a very famous composer during his lifetime, considered by many to be the equal of composers such as Corelli and Handel. Gemignani's output was mostly purely instrumental music, and like many of his contemporaries, he wrote a great number of concerti grossi, which are concertos for more than one soloist. Finally, we've made it to letter H, which is the last letter of this part 1 video of the best of Baroque composers A to Z. So please subscribe to my channel if you want to find out when part 2 and part 3 come out. My letter H composer should also be a pretty obvious one. It's George Frideric Handel. Handel was born in Halle in 1685 and died in London in 1759. Like Bach, there are so many things that can be said about Handel, and he had so many famous pieces. But perhaps his most iconic work was his oratorio Messiah, and specifically the Hallelujah Chorus, which is part of that work. This oratorio, unlike much or even most Baroque music, used quite large orchestral and vocal forces for its original performances, which were in Dublin. By large, though, I mean something more like this, and a little bit less like this. Okay, that's all for today. Please consider supporting me over on Patreon, link in description, if you want me to keep making videos like this one. And please also subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so that you get notified every time I put out a new video. And if you found this video useful or helpful, please give it a like and leave me a comment below with any questions you have, and I'll try to get back to you. Thank you so much for watching.